Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. This paper is an outcome of a physical documentation activity on the Cabañeros house in Barangay Anos, Tayabas, Quezon last April 2023. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the students who were involved in the documentation of the house as part of our course in heritage conservation in Mapua. They provided some photos, some of the photos that you'll see, and the illustrations for this presentation, not to mention our extra time in discussing about our observations. I also want to thank, of course, on behalf of our class, the Cabañeros family, especially Mrs. Coreth Cabañeros Gasgas, for being generous in sharing her memories about the house and allowing us to document it in the first place. Salamat din sa OST Tayabas, Tayabas Heritage Group for guiding us and patiently coordinating our visit. At first, we might think that because architecture is something visual in its form and structure, it is all tangible. Yet the physical realm of architecture is complex because of the inherent intangible manifestations. This is especially true in vernacular architecture, where there are many deeply rooted intangible qualities. Pero ano nga ba yung vernacular architecture? Ang salitang vernacular is usually or originally used in linguistics, and it means native or indigenous. Galing siya sa salitang vernaculus na Latin. It pertains to language or wika, how language is spoken in a place or where you grew up and lived in. In architecture, they borrowed vernacular to mean native way of building or native language of building. Now, that basic definition is articulated by Dr. Paul Oliver as architecture that is owner-built or community-built, where even if specialized skills of carpenters or stonemasons are utilized, these skills are locally based. They are locally acquired skills, and where it has a fairly direct correspondence with the immediate local context of cultural and social tradition, climate, and material resources. The Filipino vernacular house uses the same definition, and as an addition to this, it shares very close features with the Southeast Asian houses. It's raised from the ground by a set of posts, steep roof, and light materials, all adapting to a tropical climate. The Bahay Kubo Ifugao House and Maranao House are just few examples of pure vernacular in the Philippines. They represent a certain, sometimes they represent a certain ethno-linguistic community, and sometimes they just represent a place. Now, the Arquitectura Mestiza is also vernacular, but it is of the hybrid kind, together with the Bahay na Bato and the Ivatan House. They have foreign influences, but have adapted to the needs of the Filipinos and have become traditional to us as well. However, the least talked about or undefined in the Filipino pure vernacular is the Bahay na Kahoy. It's a common house found everywhere in the country, and today it is more seen in rural parts where punong kahoy is abundant. Usually it's interchanged with or mistaken as the Bahay Kubo. But strictly speaking, the Bahay Kubo is basically a one-room affair. Walang mga kwarto. It's less permanent. And kadalasan yari ito sa kawayan, sawali at nipa or kogon. Yung pinangalanan ng Amerikano na nipa hut ay isang uri ng Southeast Asian vernacular. At ito nga yung bahay na kubo. It was constructed to adapt perfectly to the tropical climate and be easily repaired once damaged by typhoon, flood, and earthquake. The illustration of the Bahay na Kahoy, this illustration is from the Philippine ancestral houses. This is my favorite illustration when I give a lecture on Filipino architecture. I used to call it transitioning house. It's a different perspective when we recognize vernacular house types because they are taught, sometimes they're taught as improvements from the simple bahay kubo to a more permanent bahay na bato, and then to a safer arquitectura mestiza. In that sense, it's possible that the bahay na kahoy is an improvement of a bahay kubo. One written source of the Filipino bahay na kahoy, the oldest source, can be found in Antonio Pigafetta's journal describing the houses as constructed of wood and are built on planks and bamboo, raised from the ground raised high from the ground by large logs and entered by means of a ladder. They have rooms like ours, and under the house they keep their animals. Yung part na sinabi niya, they have rooms like ours, implies two things. That having rooms in houses in the Philippines were not of foreign influence. Kasi kadarating lang nila eh. And that the house that he was looking at was not a bahay kubo kasi malaki at saka gawa sa kahoy. Now, the bahay na kahoy was also mentioned by Jose Rizal in El Filibusterismo as bahay na tabla. Ayun, isa pang pangalan ng bahay na kahoy ay bahay na tabla. It's another type of pure vernacular. In fact, he even constructed one in Dapitan when he was exiled. That is the kind of house that he built, using molave as poste. Now, in other provinces, they also use punong kahoy para sa halige. Minsan nakabaon sa lupa, minsan naman hindi. Katulad nitong susunod na example, itong mga example sa Davao Oriental, the framework is entirely crafted with local wood. Apparently, this type of architecture has different varieties, but its wooden framework is what's really important and what defines it. Now, at this point, I'd like to describe the Cabañeros house features as we saw it last time when we visited. Now, according to the owner, the house was built in 1956 and it's now 67 years old. It's located in Barangay Anos. It's within a farmland in Tayabas, and the house can be accessed through a road only a few meters perpendicular to the highway. Including the roof, it has a total height of 7 meters, almost the same height with the fruit-bearing trees around it. So here are some drawings we produced based on the measuring activity. Alam naman natin na wala pong plano ang mga vernacular house. Hindi ginagawa ng floor plan. Kaya ito'y aming ginawa for purpose of recording the house. As you can see, the plan of the house is rectangular, wherein the ground level consists of the silong and 2 concrete enclosed rooms. The entire flooring is cemented, and overall the house occupies 102 square meters of building footprint. The silong part has some exposed wooden posts, and it has no walls on one side, only a low wall and high enough to protect the flooring, while it's also used for casual seating. The other side of the silong has been enclosed by concrete, and we can see that it's a newer construction. Now, the upper floor can be accessed to the ground floor through 1 flight of stairs from the ground floor. The stairs is made of wood, as you can see. Although the first two steps are cemented, you cannot see that, but I have another picture of it later. The back of the house has also one flight of wooden stairs to access the kitchen. From the hagdanan, an open porch leads to two entrance doors. One connects to the dining area on the left, while the right door connects to the sala. Farther from the sala is the kitchen, which partially uses split bamboo for flooring, and part concrete. The kitchen is separated from the sala by a workstation in the middle, which is an improvised space demanded by recent COVID pandemic conditions. There are two bedrooms adjacent to each other, which occupies one side of the house and are dependent on the large windows of this side of the house. The interesting part for us during our documentation was the wooden framework which defines the Bahay na Kahoy. We counted at least 20 wooden posts on the ground floor, and interestingly, it is said to be made of cacahuate or madre de cacao. Ito po. Ito isang punong kahoy na maraming pinagagamitan at maraming benepisyo sa medisina. Pinag-uusapan at pinag-aaralan sa siyensya ngayon, ang Madre de Cacao. Pero hindi pa talaga na-explore at wala pa talaga akong nababasa na ito'y ginamit bilang isang building material. Ang nabasa ko lang ay yung paggawa ng furniture. Maganda siyang gamitan as furniture, yung kakawate, pero ang gamit sa bahay na ito ng mga Cabañeros ay yung core or yung heartwood na sinasabi sa siyensya ng forestry ay napakatigas. Kaya naman yung mga peste, hindi siya kinakain, hindi kayang i-penetrate ng mga anay o ng kung ano pang mga peste. Now, on the second floor, we found 10 wooden posts and some were lumber, yung putol na sa lumber. But the outstanding was those of the Tayabas, mas kilala sa paggamit na kahoy para sa mga bahay. Itong Tayabas, mas makinis siya at saka parang nagtitwist. Yun ang basa ko diyan. At first glance, the house looks like many other wooden houses in the Philippines that we may have seen, or maybe you live in one house like this, similar to this, or maybe you have been into many. However, the amount of effort put in this house is not immediately obvious from its appearance because its structure is a collection of reused wood. Through the complex configuration of beams and posts supporting the roof, they are all deliberately exposed and visible from the silong and from the spaces on the second floor. Here are some posts on the second floor. One can find small signs of the structure's history. The older structural members contrast with the light timber of the new hardwood beams, and most of them exhibit notches and marks where it might have had a slightly different configuration in its previous life. It is very unique and special because it's like witnessing a respectful dialogue between the original builders and the ones tasked with assembling and reassembling it. It's a dialogue that speaks the local language of ecological mindfulness or pag-alumana sa kapaligiran. This is important today among the academic community rallying for sustainability in modern structural design. It's still a special moment to come across a whole structure that has succeeded in implementing a regenerative system in construction. Some architectural theories and ideas link these physical observations into intangible impressions. fundamental theory to use would be architectural tectonics theory. Now, tectonics in architecture has many definitions, but one classic definition was proposed long time ago by Gottfried Semper, where he believes that tectonics theory explores the intangible relationship between structure, construction, and form in architecture. It produces an interaction between people, nature, and culture by its dependence on the human ability to understand the influential relations between construction and structure assembly. Considering organic architecture in relation to tectonic theory, both ideas promote an honest and expressive approach to architecture. Organic architecture, by the way, refers to buildings that coexist harmoniously with their natural surroundings. Some key connections observed observed in organic architecture and Semper's tectonics theory through the Cabañeros house. First is that Semper believed that constructional aspects of a building should be emphasized and celebrated, as they express not only its structural integrity, but also its cultural significance. This can be seen in the way structural members or structural parts are exposed, like the post and beam, and they should be celebrated. And we can see it in the Cabañeros house. It's displayed by showcasing the constructional elements. Vernacular architecture becomes a visual representation of its own tectonics, expressing its current cultural identity and values. Tectonics also emphasizes the significance of construction techniques, materials, and contextual response. The Bahay na Kahoy is a good example, and it exemplifies the integration of cultural values, local resources, and environmental considerations through the reuse of building materials. By understanding and appreciating this connection, we can gain insight into the local method or principles of structural reuse and perhaps apply it to modern construction or modern conservation. Organic architecture seeks to integrate the buildings seamlessly into their surroundings. So this is what one of the key principles of organic philosophy in architecture. This is evident in the Bahay na Kahoy, having retained a building footprint at 102 square meters. So parang ang nangyayari tuloy, parang walang seam, walang balakid between the building and nature because of the, it has maintained that area of 102 square meters. It blends with the natural environment. It retains harmony with the natural environment. Also, in organic principle, it's an organic principle that architecture should promote the idea of designing buildings that stand the test of time. Yung Bahay na Kahoy, alam natin, 67 years na of structural integrity at nakatayo pa rin siya. Gawa sa kahoy ito. Its significance of this link is that properly maintained wooden structures can last for generations, showcasing the durability and longevity of both the material and the constructional system. The structural expression of the house, as we have seen, exemplifies organic and tectonic balance towards people, nature, and culture. From these considerations and connections I just presented, it is evident that there are several intangible values that contribute to the overall significance of this house. As a summary, these values can manifest in the following ways. First is environmental harmony and sustainability. The Cabañeros house is designed with a deep respect for the environment and focus on sustainability. The use of locally sourced cacahuate and bayabas and many other punong kahoy, the reuse of structural wood promotes a sense of ecological responsibility and reduces the carbon footprint associated with construction. Living in such a house can provide the family members with a sense of environmental harmony and a connection to nature, fostering a greater appreciation for sustainable living practices. Another point is the emotional and aesthetic appeal. The warmth, beauty, and natural qualities of wood create a sensory experience that evoke positive emotions and a sense of comfort. According to environmental psychology studies, this emotional response to the house enhances the overall quality of living and adds an intangible value that cannot be easily quantified. Lastly, I'd like to add the language of spaces that can be found in the barangay, in the Bahay na Kahoy. The Bahay na Kahoy creates a strong sense of connection and identity. The pattern of space o yung arrangement niya is recognizable to locals as familiar in the way spaces are arranged and provided. It speaks the language of space as fluently and as eloquently as many other celebrated pieces of architecture in the Philippines. Ang example dito, yung hagdanan. Ang hagdanan controls the transition. Merong transition from public, semi-public, and private areas to the private domain. No, ito'y nangungusap sa ating mga Pilipino, mga kapitbahay, at alam natin na yung pag-iwan ng sapatos at tsinelas pag nakakita tayo ng hagdanan, lalo na sa bahay na kahoy. Wala nang di na kailangang sabihan, pero may pangungusap yung ganong klaseng arrangement. Pag nakita mo, dahil sa hagdanan, meron tayong pare-pareho nating ginagawa na mag-iiwan ng sapatos o tsinelas sa baba ng hagdan bago ka umakyat sa private space. Kasi as space in architecture, it signals the change of possession or territory or of control and behavior. No, so we behave that way. We leave our chinelas also to show our respect for the owners. It speaks the language of space as fluently and very eloquently, as I said earlier, like other pieces of architecture. This connection, therefore, enhances the residents' sense of place and their identification with the community, contributing to their overall well-being and satisfaction with their living environment. Overall, the Bahay na Kahoy possesses intangible values that go beyond its physical attributes. Through its cultural heritage as pure Filipino vernacular, sense of belonging, emotional appeal, sustainable reuse, it becomes meaningful and cherished part of the built environment of Tayabas. Maraming salamat po.